general public, for the most part, has very little idea of what is beneath the sea, especially what is at great depth in the sea. However, I think if you were to be speaking about some of the world's intelligence agencies or leading oceanographic institutes, they would have a much better idea of what's down there. And I also believe in the case of some of the initiatic or secret societies that a great deal is known about the subterranean depths and the submarine depths, well above and beyond what would be true of the proverbial man and woman in the street.
Well, that is a really good observation. You're right. When I say we, I'm talking about, the guys down at Charlotte Motor Speedway. I'm talking about the average person that watches History Channel or National Geographic Channel. They know the animated version of the world.
You're right. As far as that goes, most of those people believe that the attacks on 9/11, which are being much lauded and memorialized today, were actually carried out by crazed Arab terrorists on September 11th, 2001, when independent researchers have established very well that is not what happened at all. But what we saw was some kind of inside job, if you will, or false flag terrorist event carried out by government agencies of the United States and other governments. So if that's true, and it is, most people, meaning most average members of society, really live in a very sophisticated web or cocoon, if you will, of deceit, disinformation, misinformation, and very smug and snug and almost complete ignorance.
Well, I realize that you could probably make a case that says, well, if they'll lie to us about this, they'll lie to us about everything. And, I can give that the benefit of the doubt, but I have to ask the question sometimes, do we or do we not really have a craft that can make a left-hand turn at 10,000 miles an hour?
Well, again, this gets back to exactly whom you mean when you say we. Now, I have no doubt, based on my research, that yes, there are human factions on this planet who have craft such as that. And I must tell you whom I believe those factions are. They would be very compartmentalized groups within the American military-industrial aerospace complex. They would be perhaps relict human groups from Atlantean times or from the ancient Rama Empire in ancient India in Vedic times. They would perhaps be human groups that are on this planet but who originated off the planet, either in the present time or in the past or in the future, but are here now, if you follow me. So
well,
would be,
I understand that, but we've talked about, and I'm sure you're familiar with, the idea that there's sort of a blending of the militaries around the world. There's really no U.S. military government complex. It's sort of U.S., China, German, Japanese, all kinds of secret elements, or shall I say extra military elements of many countries are involved in this.
Yes. Well, an answer to that question is yes and no. For example, you do have the Pentagon, for example, and then you have the Kremlin forces, and you have the People's Liberation Army in China, and so forth. And there is a great deal of in-house secrecy in those militaries. But you rightly observe, at a higher level, there is a great deal of cooperation between militaries across the planet. In the case of alliances such as the Shanghai Cooperation Council or NATO or other organizations, CETO, other military alliances and organizations such as that. At the same time, you have a certain amount of high-level sharing of technology and even strategy and tactics between putative enemies such as, or potential enemies such as the People's Liberation Army and the Pentagon.
Oh, sure. We see that going all the way back to World War II, where Germany and the United States collaborated very clearly on the atomic weapon that was used on Japan. All three countries were at war, and there were, robber barons making money off both sides. We're clear on that, but we are still.
I don't think the Wehrmacht and the Luftwaffe and the Kriegsmarine and the Gestapo and the SS did not collaborate directly with the United States Army and the United States Army Air Force and the United States Navy. That didn't happen, but there were industrialists on both sides who played both sides of the conflict.
That's correct. That's correct. So we have this.
When you come down to the present day, and a case in point would be during the Clinton administration, there clearly was outright sharing or at least selling very sensitive military technology to the Chinese, especially as regards ballistic missile technology, and also as regards very sophisticated high-speed supercomputer digital technology and that kind of thing. So, yes, this does go on, and at a very high level, you do find a certain amount of exchange of scientific and technological knowledge and expertise and personnel. And this has been going on for a very long time. It's clear that, as you observe, at a certain level, the game is rigged and fixed, and it is as if there's a very large, high-stakes game being played. And from my viewpoint, the ultimate game is control of the planet's resources, the planet's life forms, all of them, including the human race, by a very relatively small number of humans and perhaps other beings on the planet, off the planet, and under the planet, beneath the surface, and exactly why they want to do that, exactly who these beings are. I'm not presently able to answer those questions.
Well, we've speculated on that from time to time. The Nephilim, the Anunnaki, the various latent races or even new races that are visiting the Earth and trying to dominate in one way or another, or even some that are here that are very benevolent and trying to save the world and keep us from proliferating nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction. Be that as it may, let's see if we can go from the ground up here. Let's just assume that these USOs or these undersea bases really do exist. And I would love it if you had some evidence, not evidence, but I know you can't do that on the radio. Here, look at this. No, I'm kidding. Some ideas about the legitimacy of real civilizations that might be living under the sea. And we do apparently have more comings and goings under the sea or in and out of the sea than we have on land. So what information do you have that you've learned or that you suspect about civilizations that might be sharing our planet that are not showing up at the local Walmart?
Yes. Well, to tell the truth, they may be showing up at the local Walmart, too. And I will say that there's a good deal of witness testimony and experiencer testimony over a period of decades that indicates a good number of these so-called alien beings who are here are actually quite human in appearance. Indeed, they seem to be human, not necessarily from this planet in all cases. But it seems that some of them could indeed pass beside us in a Walmart or anywhere else without attracting undue notice. And I would surmise that a good number of them do go about in our society and or at large on the surface of the planet, unbeknownst to us usually. Now, as regards what's happening undersea, I can give you an example of what you can read in some of the kinds of things that you will hear, and that is there's a Puerto Rican ufologist named Jorge Martin, and he has a recent book that came out a few years ago entitled Vieque, Polígono del Tercer Tipo. And in that book, he deals with the great amount of reports of UFOs seen entering the waters around Puerto Rico and the many strange activities of the United States military in those waters around Puerto Rico. One story that was related to him was by a man named Senor Roldan, who reported being taken by some humanoid-type beings. They're human-like, but they're not exactly as human in appearance as we are, but they are somewhat human-appearing. And they took him in a flying saucer type of vehicle under the water into the deep sea to a city that was on the seafloor to the east of Puerto Rico, thousands of feet underwater, where there was a great big transparent crystal type of dome on the seafloor with a futuristic type of city inside this dome. And they took him into this dome, and I spent some time there and then returned. And there have been a number of stories like this over the years. That's just one I happen to know of because I read it in Jorge Martin's book. I do know Jorge Martin personally, and we've communicated many times over the years by letter, by email, over the telephone, and also in person. And I'm inclined to believe that that story may be true because there have been so many UFOs or USOs, if you will, that have been reported coming and going from the seas, oceans, lakes, and rivers of this planet really for centuries. This is not a recent thing. It's been going on for a long, long time if you look back into history and then coming down to the present day. So I would certainly regard the Caribbean area, including the waters around Puerto Rico, as an area of high likelihood for undersea bases, not only for other civilizations, but for our own bases that could well have been built by the American Navy or by other technologically competent organizations, whether they be military, non-military governmental agencies, or corporate organizations.
Well, one would have to think that if surface organizations are behind the construction of these bases under the water, that the civilizations that live there, the men and women and ostensibly children, whole civilizations that live there, would generally not blend with the surface dwellers anymore. They wouldn't just